Welcome to the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. I'm Christian of Standing Stones Healing, founder of the Reiki Business Collective and creator of the Build Your Reiki Business program, sending blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business. Greetings, welcome, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. I'm Christian of Standing Stones Healing and am grateful to have you here. So thank you so much. In this week's episode, we're talking about taxes. Yes, we are talking about taxes for your Reiki business. But first, I don't want to forget to invite you to the workshop on February the 10th about how to build your remote Reiki business. So how to build your distance Reiki business, how to build your online Reiki business. That is on February the 10th, Saturday, February the 10th at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time. The link to learn more and register is down below. Thank you. As we discuss taxes this week, it's important for me to recognize and emphasize that I am not a tax professional. I am not an accountant. I am not a tax lawyer. I am none of those things. I am simply a Reiki business owner who has done this and who knows a thing or two. The truth is that I'm always hesitant to share tax information, even when it comes straight from the IRS, and even when it is true, simply because this is not my area of expertise. But what I am sharing with you in this episode are things that you need to know. And if I don't tell you, I honestly don't know who will as you start your Reiki business journey. And so I truly feel that it is my duty to share this information with you. Of course, there's a whole lot more about taxes in the Build Your Reiki Business program because it is a very important and oftentimes confusing and overwhelming subject. I also want to make sure to note that the information I share is for US-based businesses only. I know nothing about taxes in any other country, period. So thank you so very much. So first and foremost, when it comes to your Reiki business taxes, the first thing that you really need to know. Now, I also want to state, of course, these are for federal taxes only. Each state is different. We are not going to talk about states at all. There are 50 of them. And so what I share with you is for federal taxes only. So the first thing you need to know is that with your Reiki business, when you earn $400 or more in your Reiki business, that's when the IRS is going to want a cut. And so as you start your Reiki business, if you earn less than $400, congratulations, good news, you don't even have to report that on your taxes. So the IRS likes to cut you a little break and you can earn $400 tax-free in your Reiki business. But once you earn more than $400, the IRS wants a cut. And that means that once you earn more than $400 in your Reiki business, you're going to need to declare those earnings on your taxes. Now, you might be thinking, well, Christian, this only matters if I have a formal business, right? If it's just me offering sessions out of my spare room and I don't have a formal business, then I'm good to go, right? No, I'm sorry, the IRS still considers that a business. The point at which you are receiving money for your Reiki sessions, congratulations, you have a Reiki business. And so what that means is that once you earn more than $400 from your Reiki business activity, the IRS wants to know, and the IRS wants its cut. The second thing you need to know about taxes is that for the vast majority of Reiki businesses, they have what is called pass-through taxation, where it's easy for you and for the IRS, where what the IRS does is they say, Reiki business owner, just put your Reiki business earnings on your personal 1040 form. And so it's very simple. It may not seem simple, but it's when it's passed through taxation, the earnings from your Reiki business simply pass through your personal tax return. This is the case even if you are an LLC. Now, if you are a sole proprietor, this is the case. It's also the case even if you are a single member LLC. Now, there are different rules if you have a partnership or if you have an S Corp. This is a different kind of LLC. And if you're feeling really confused about what those terms mean, sole proprietor or LLC, I have plenty of resources for you on that. Number one, there are a couple of earlier podcast episodes about LLCs and the differences between that type of business and a sole proprietorship. And also in the free Reiki Biz Kit, there is the DBA LLC OMG article that explains all of it in crystal clear language that you will understand. But for the purposes of this podcast, it's simply important for you to understand that the chances are very good that with your Reiki business, you have pass-through taxation, meaning that you simply put your Reiki business earnings on your personal tax return. Now, in the Build Your Reiki Business program, I walk you through this whole process. I show you the tax forms. I explain exactly where it goes on the tax forms. I mean, I don't know if anybody uses tax forms anymore, but it's all spelled out for you very clearly so that you can understand exactly how it all works. But your Reiki business earnings will go with your own personal tax return, your own personal income. And so if you have W-2 income, of course, that goes on your 1040. So too will your Reiki business earnings, whatever they might be, whatever that amount is. The next thing that is important for you to know about your Reiki business taxes is that that amount that you claim as your earnings on your 1040 is minus your business expenses. And so when I say the IRS wants a cut of that 400 plus, that's your earnings. Your expenses are going to reduce your Reiki business earnings. So let's say that you earned in your Reiki business $10,000 for the year and your expenses were $2,000, maybe your rent, maybe your scheduling software, your website, that all added up to $2,000. That $2,000 is subtracted from the $10,000, and so your yearly Reiki business earnings are $8,000, and you would pay tax on the $8,000, not on the $10,000. Now, what this means for your Reiki business is that expenses are very important in your Reiki business, and making sure that you are tracking all of your expenses is very important, because your Reiki business expenses are the only way that you can reduce that Reiki business income that you would pay taxes on. So this is very important. Please, no matter how much you make in your Reiki business, please catalog all expenses. Please keep track of all expenses. Please know exactly how much to the penny your expenses are for the year, because this is going to reduce the amount of taxes you will pay. I once had an in-person Reiki business client. She actually had a massage therapy business. And she said to me, I really need to reduce the amount that I pay in taxes. I pay so much in taxes. And when I looked at her business and I looked at her process and what she was doing, she had a drawer full of receipts. And when she made a purchase, she would just throw the receipt in the drawer, and then eventually it might get added into her accounting software system. That was if she remembered to put the receipt in the drawer in the first place. And so the very first place for her to start with reducing the amount of taxes she was paying was just to simply stay on top of the expenses and where she was spending money in her business and reducing her income through expenses. That system really needed to be cleaned up. One of the members of the Build Your Reiki Business program said that really one of the most important things she learned in the program was keeping all of her receipts and tracking all expenses. Now, when it comes to tracking your expenses, anything over $75 and over, you will want to keep a receipt for. The IRS requires a receipt for anything that is $75 and over. That means that if you ever get audited and the IRS wants to look at your books and they see a purchase for $75 or more, they're going to want to see a receipt as proof of that purchase. That's the IRS's standard, but I want to encourage you to save every single receipt. I'll tell you that in my Reiki business, indeed, I will save receipts for $1. Oh, I bought that little calendar for $1. Yes, indeed. Let me save that receipt and let me catalog that. But don't worry, I don't have a drawer full of receipts. The IRS does allow you to keep digital copies, photographs of receipts as proof. So however you keep them, I strongly encourage keeping every single receipt. And once you get into the habit of that, it's actually not that hard. Exactly what counts as an expense, I do talk all about that in the Build Your Reiki Business program, break it down for you, show you the categories, and show you how you can categorize different expenses. I can't go into that on this podcast. We simply don't have the time. And there are a lot of potential expenses for your Reiki business. But when it comes to expenses, the most important things that I want to encourage you to do are to keep track of all of them and to keep all of your receipts. Now, expenses are so important to keep track of because, like I mentioned, they reduce your overall tax liability. And when it comes to our Reiki business earnings, they are not your typical W-2 earnings, where, of course, if you have an employer, they are taking taxes out of your paycheck. And so they're taking out the tax that is then going to the IRS. But for the vast majority of us in our Reiki business, we are not earning earnings for our Reiki business from another company. We may very well be, but many of us, most of us in our Reiki business, our company is the company. And so as you earn your Reiki business earnings, no one is taking tax out of it. There is no boss, there is no employer that is taking the taxes, the federal taxes, out of your Reiki business earnings. This means that you are going to owe money on your Reiki business earnings. You are going to pay tax on them because no tax has been taken out. I want to emphasize this because I don't want you to be caught surprised. I don't want you to be caught with a big tax bill. I don't want you to be caught unaware that if you have Reiki business earnings, and of course no taxes have been taken out, you will owe taxes. I also want to emphasize that this does not matter how much you earn in relation to the standard deduction. What that means is that the standard deduction is currently around $12,000, $13,000. And of course, as most of us know, that amount we deduct from our earnings and we don't pay taxes on. And you might be thinking, oh, well, if I earn in my Reiki business less than $12,000, then I don't have to pay tax on it, right? No, that is wrong. You will still have to pay some tax on it because even if you earn money outside of your Reiki business and you are getting money back from the IRS is still keeping a percentage of that. The way that we pay federal taxes, there are a couple of categories of tax. There's income tax, there's FICA, and the IRS always takes a cut of the earnings that we do not get back. And so that means that it's very important for you to know that if you earn money in your Reiki business, you are going to pay some kind of tax on it. This is why having those expenses cataloged is so important, because it's the only way that you are able to reduce the tax liability for your Reiki business earnings. So please, please make sure that you are cataloging all of your expenses so that you can reduce your Reiki business earnings as much as possible so that you are not overpaying on your Reiki business taxes. Expenses in your Reiki business are things like advertising, insurance, any fees that you might pay to a professional Reiki association if you are the member of one, any rent that you might pay for a space, any office expenses, software, your website, really anything that is necessary to the operation of your business. Training does count as well, and training like the Build Your Reiki Business program does count as well. And so if you are listening and you are a member of the Build Your Reiki Business program, please keep your receipt and please count that as an expense on your taxes. I explain exactly how to do this in the program. Please check module number 4 with the video on the federal taxes walkthrough with the forms, where I share my screen and show the forms. I explain exactly how to claim, how to write off, how to deduct the cost of the Build Your Reiki Business Program membership fee. Now, there is so much to say about taxes, of course. Of course, the Build Your Reiki Business Program says more about them. Of course, I cannot say too much on this podcast, but if I am not going to say it, I honestly don't know where else you might hear it. To know these things as you are at the very beginning stages, or maybe even later in your Reiki business. But there's one more thing. There's one more thing that I feel obligated to make sure that you know. Is that if you owe the IRS more than $1,000, there is a penalty attached to that. Now, there are ways around this penalty, but if you are a brand new Reiki business owner, you may not be able to get around that penalty if you owe more than $1,000. This is not something that is well known. I know it because of personal experience. Many years ago, I'm not sure exactly what year it was, maybe 2015, I think, maybe 2016, I ended up owing more than $1,000 on my taxes that year. Oops, my financial advisor did not inform me that that would happen. And the good news is that I owed only just over $1,000. And so my penalty was very small. It's a percentage of what you owe. In addition to ditching that financial advisor, I learned a very important lesson that I want to pass along to you to make sure that you don't make this same mistake. And that is to keep track of your income versus your expenses, and to make sure that you don't go over that $1,000 limit in order to trigger a penalty. You know what's interesting and fascinating and annoying is that when the IRS owes you $1,000 for the tax year, they don't pay a penalty to you. But when you owe them $1,000, you pay a penalty to them. The ways in which Reiki business owners can avoid paying a penalty for underpayment on their taxes is to pay estimated or quarterly taxes throughout the tax year. Now, as a new Reiki business owner, you're not required to do this, but you can make a payment to the IRS during the tax year in order to reduce that overall tax liability for when you file your taxes. What that means is that if you are thinking in your head, oh my gosh, I think that I might run up against owing more than $1,000, and oh my gosh, I might have a penalty. Know that, first of all, there are ways around that penalty. There are certain qualifications that mean that you don't have to pay the penalty. No, it does not have to do with income. I'm sorry. It has to do with your prior year tax liability and some other things that are a little complicated that I can't get into on the podcast. But anyone can actually make a payment to the IRS at any time. So you can log on to the IRS's system and pay them for the tax year ahead of time. And so that means that you can log into the system, IRS system, and make a payment to reduce that payment that you would owe for that tax year without making quarterly payments. So that's an option for you. And of course, making sure that you are reducing your income by cataloging and counting every expense that you can. I also recommend, of course, talking with your own tax professional, your own tax accountant, your own tax lawyer, or whomever you might be working with. Make sure to let them know that you have a Reiki business, that you have Reiki business earnings, and make sure that you have all of your expenses cataloged, all of your income cataloged. When it comes time for taxes, it's going to make your life so much easier, and your accountant/tax professional or lawyer is going to love you. Of course, I am sending so many blessings and best wishes to your taxes, And if you're interested in the Build Your Reiki Business program, in which we talk a whole lot more about taxes, you can learn more and get on the wait list at standingstoneshealing.com/build. That program is not yet open for enrollment again. It will be soon, and anyone on the wait list will get notification and get the opportunity to join first. And so you can join the wait list at standingstoneshealing.com/build. Sending blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business. Thanks for tuning in to the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, and send to a friend. Learn more about the Build Your Reiki Business program at standingstoneshealing.com/build. Sending blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business.